Welcome back, everyone, to the Brocast. I'm David Woods from Bruin Report Online. He's Tracy Pearson. And that guy down there, you see him down there? If you're listening, this isn't going to help. Ken Graiwer, men of Westwood. Ken, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Doing just great. Splendid. Tracy, I didn't ask how you were. You're second on the list today.
How are you, Dave? Every time I see you, you're looking more handsome.
Thank you. Thank you. I actually shaved recently.
Look at that. Look, now you can actually see oh my God, people are going to seize up.
I know.
Knowing that the beard wasn't there for a while.
Look at the jaw. Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. But we're not here to talk about my facial hair. No.
Let's talk about bamboo.
Let's talk about bamboo. Ken, you're sitting in front of a bunch of bamboo.
I am.
Can you tell us how it grows? Does it grow
slowly
overnight?
No, very slowly.
Would you say that you have to water and water and water and nothing happens and then years later it suddenly springs up, or is it a gradual?
It's a gradual process.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That's shocking. I know. Yeah. But that's what it is.
Okay.
Very, very interesting.
We're going to have a horticulture podcast.
I like to think of us as amateur botanists.
Okay. I could be an amateur botanist.
Yes.
Let's go with that for a while.
Let's do it. Ken, so we are, I would say are we pretty much wrapped with transfer season for basketball?
I would say for both men and women, yes. That would be my gut feel. If something presents itself, I would think that either program would take a look in it, but in terms of massive dollars being spent, yes, we're wrapped.
So at this point, that leaves UCLA with obviously, and we can kind of go through the list of some of these guys, but with 5 transfer commitments: Donovan Dent, Jamar Brown, Xavier Booker, Stephen Jamerson, and then most recently Anthony Peoples Jr. Let's start with the headliner, Donovan Dent. How, what was this process like for, and as much or as little as you can get into it, but what was this process like of, putting together the ability to get that guy?
I would tell you that, it's a constant process with Mick and the staff. So it was identified, I would tell you, pretty, into the season, what strengths and weaknesses were to this team. So when we were unfortunately eliminated, there was literally no rest, right? We lost on a Saturday night. Everyone flew back from Kentucky on Sunday. Meetings began on Monday, and most of the players were wrapped or signed, however you want to put it, within 48 hours, right? Like there was a true process and a goal in place. Point guard was a well-known, needed position, and the second Donovan went into the portal, it was excuse the pun, but a full court press. There was some aspects to it that everyone needed to be involved with, not just financially, but what we could do academically for Donovan at UCLA, what his family wanted, what he wanted, and we were going against the best of the best out there. So it was, I would tell you, a week of no sleep just to make sure that everything was done right. But we were well prepared for Donovan or any other, for lack of a better way of putting it, big ticket item.
So we know that Mick Cronin had a pre-existing relationship with Donovan going back for years. I know he liked him out of high school and he would have liked to have taken him. He just kind of didn't have space. How much did that impact the recruitment, do you think? And everyone's talking obviously about how the money is the big key, but what were some of the other elements too that really came into play, do you think, in Dent's decision?
Look, let's work backwards, right? With, because obviously the big carrot out there is obviously money. When everyone's roughly the same, and when you're offering life-changing money to someone, it goes to everything else, right? So it was Mick Cronin's relationship. It was Mick Cronin's relationship not only with Donovan, but with his high school coach, with players, with other teammates of Donovan, whether it's in high school or AAU basketball. It's all the people that you know and the relationships that you build up over time. That I mean, it's the value there is unquantified, right? But at the end of the day, I definitely think that was something that was the tilting point for us, because if not, you could say there's the allure of everything else. So
In the age of a lot of these players being semi-diva-ish and jaded, let's say, what was your takeaway from Donovan and his family's ultimate reaction to getting into UCLA, getting that deal signed, being on campus for his official visit? What's been your impression of that?
he's a Bruin through and through, and everyone's going to be proud of him. He's one of the diva is not the word to use for Donovan. One of the greatest kids you'll meet, talk to, speak to. He is so appreciative of the opportunity that has been given to him. He understands the life-changing aspects that have been presented to him, right? Not only from financial, but from the ability that he's going to get his UCLA degree. I can tell you that when everything was done, when the proverbial I's were dotted and the T's were crossed, it took him all of about 5 seconds after coach called him and said, you're officially a Bruin, for him to release the hounds and just go crazy. I mean, he was with his family. They were awaiting the call. So it was something spectacular, and I think we're all going to see it not only on the floor but off the floor, how well he represents himself, how he represents our university, and how he represents our basketball program.
So Donovan, it's so interesting, and I want to talk about the most recent commitment, because Anthony Peoples Jr., for people who weren't aware, was actually a teammate of Donovan's back in high school. How much of that connection, because you talked about the connections with Cronin and Dent, but how much of that connection played a role in adding Anthony Peoples pretty late into this transfer class as well?
Look, it couldn't hurt, right? Like that's really what it comes down to, and you also have, not only that, but our team has been great. Our returning players, whether it's Sky Clark, Eric Daly, Tyler Bilodeau, Eric Freeney, these guys have gone out and above and beyond helping us recruit, talk to the players. Eric is another one from there. So it's been really amazing to see how invested everyone is. This is when Tracy, when you just used the word diva, we don't really have those. We have guys that really want to win, that are hungry to win, that are disappointed with how last season finished, and there's a reason that they came back. Everyone is afforded an opportunity to go elsewhere, and the ones that didn't, speaks volumes for them. But they were also, I think Tracy, you coined the phrase, made Cronin men. Those are them. So these guys want to be here. They want to be taught by Mick and his staff, and they want to represent UCLA proudly, and they want to win at the highest level, and that's what we're gunning to do this year.
I'd say, if I'm judging by just our little premium basketball forum here, Ken, the transfer that might be the most controversial is probably Xavier Booker. Just because, and you can understand, I mean, he was kind of a floating face-up four at Michigan State. Now he's going to transition to being a real low-post player. Talk a little bit about what went into that whole process of recruiting him, and your dealings with your involvement in that, and just how that went down.
Well, originally that was not the plan. We'll put it like that. So in this day and age, you have to pivot, and we, Mick had to pivot pretty quickly. I think this whole transfer portal has gone fast and furious. So our goal up front was to act quickly because we knew what the market was going to do, or I shouldn't say we knew what the market was going to do. We had an inkling of the where the inflation was going to go. So we wanted to make sure that we had our ability to lock in our guys, and really put an emphasis on what we wanted. So when our 5 position opened, that was it's the staff's job to figure out which player to get. That's Mick's job. He'll then tell me that it's my job to make sure that I go get him. So at the end of the day, Xavier, the negotiation and the ability to get him was buoyed by the fact that over the last year or so, I and the entire staff of Men of Westwood and Champion of Westwood have developed relationships with agents, agencies. So the representation of Xavier is the representation of some other players that we have dealt with, and we've maintained a great relationship with. So it was very easy at that point to negotiate from the standpoint of they know what UCLA is all about. They were able to see the fit. Mick and staff talked to Xavier and the family about what his role at UCLA would be, and that's a coaching decision. So once that was established, we were able to act quickly and secure it because that was a massive position of need. And at the end of the day, I know that the staff, the players, the program is very excited to bring in a talent like Xavier and really unleash him with Donovan and all the returning players.
You touched on really fast, Dave. I just wanted, and we can get into this more in depth if you want to talk about more players, Dave. But the word inflation. You and I talk regularly, Ken, and I mean, my personal opinion is that you had a really good bead going into the transfer portal window season of where the inflation would go. I mean, talk a little bit about that and maybe some aspects of it that maybe you were a little surprised about it. I mean, let's just say a guy like Wesley Yates getting close to $4 million. I mean, maybe the top end guys I anticipated would get a lot of money, but some of those guys like that getting $3 to $4 million is where I was surprised. So talk a little bit about your impression of the inflation from when you started this at last year's transfer portal season to now.
Oh, it's triple. I mean, it's through the roof. So the issue that we thought was going to come to play, and look, it's not only come into play with men's basketball, but I can tell you on the women's side, we've dealt with the same thing. And thank God I have a great a friend who's helping there, Michael Price. He'll tell you the same thing when we were, he was dealing with the women more on a more daily basis than I was, but it's an industry-wide aspect, right? So you have the court settlement, which is supposed to come down any day now, but I've said that for the last feels like 60 days at this point. So you have this rev share, which is ironic because it's actually not rev share, it's NIL, right? So the term rev share is absolute. I don't understand why they continue to use that, but we can get into that later. So we kind of knew that there would be this window, what's being called pre-7-1, right? So when the court settlement comes into place, it's going to be all from 7-1 forward. So there was all this money that was going to be out there. So the ability would be to spend it before it had to go through the clearinghouse. And then what happened was you started to get teams, and we can use ourselves as the example to lock down their guys to establish their core players. So that started to take players off the board. Now, mind you, there was 2,000 players in the portal within probably 96 hours.
Yeah.
I think right. So there was this big game of musical chairs. So we kind of knew that you had to act quickly from the standpoint of the top tier players were going to go because they want to go to the places where they can win the most and generate the most revenue for themselves. And at that point, once players started coming off the board, you had the second tier teams that were taking some more time, or the teams that kind of that went through coaching changes, right? Maryland, Villanova, where they were left with a big bag of cash, for lack of a better way of putting it, and they needed to spend it. And then all of a sudden, you see the market explode. So I'm very proud of how we did it. I'm very thankful that Mick really has had his pulse on this from day one. He's always been a step ahead from when NIL was going to first start, to how it needed to be, to working with donors, to really dealing with the behind the scenes stuff that no one really looks at, right? And the staff knew that we would have to act quickly because you'd maximize your dollars versus having to pay for one player that you would get 2 or 3 players for. With
the market being what it is, and this may have been true before too, but it seemed especially true this cycle. The difference between, from a cost standpoint, of retaining your own players versus acquiring new ones, what does that look like at this point, for UCLA in specific, but I'm sure it's a market-wide phenomenon?
Look, I can only speak, for retaining players, I can only speak to those that we retained, right? Like, I have an idea of what some of the guys that we did not retain got, and good for them. I mean, the numbers are astronomical. A few of them we would not have even considered paying that number. But again, that's the inflation standpoint, or that's the other standpoint of there are players that went in and teams just needed to spend money. So why not get a guy from UCLA? Because that's a good selling point. But mazel tov to them. From the standpoint of retaining them, we wanted to make sure that all our guys were taken care of. We wanted to make sure that we gave them a package that would not incentivize them to go elsewhere. We wanted to, first of all, we wanted to make sure that they wanted to be back, right? That's where it starts with Mick. So on that Monday after the loss, he had exit interviews immediately. Like, he literally, I think, probably slept 5 hours because he was so angry about the loss. And immediately went to work. So we were building the infrastructure of our roster immediately then. We really tried not to talk to the guys about it during the tournament, because we wanted them focused on that. And I can say it was the same thing over on our women's side too. We wanted them to win the title, and trying to negotiate with your own players, that could go 2 different directions, right? So, but that all being said, we kind of knew what we could do, where we had flexibility. And in this day and age of roster upheaval every year, I think it's very beneficial that we're bringing back a majority of our players and the ones that can contribute, and putting them in better positions to succeed this year, from the standpoint of they know how Mick coaches. They know they're not going to be shell shocked with a practice or games, but they also know how to talk to each other, how to play with each other. So I think that's going to be very helpful moving forward. And then you add in an all-American talent like Donovan Dent. That's pretty special.
I think one thing you touched on here, overall, Ken, one of the reasons why we wanted to have you on is to further elucidate our bros about really understanding what this all entails, this whole process. It's so hard to explain it to them, because they don't have all the information. A lot of times we can't give them all the information. But from the inside of learning of your experience of having to, like you said, the player meetings, knowing who's returning, then going out there and trying to recognize the staff, going out and trying to recognize the transfers it's going to target, you putting the packages, the NIL packages together for them. I know this is hard and this is a general kind of description, but if you could maybe talk a little bit about what that's like when that happens, let's say the first couple of weeks of the transfer portal. And I think what a lot of people don't understand, they see the top end prices of Donovan Dent or some of the other high end transfers, but they don't understand really what returning players, and even, I'm not going to say secondary transfers, but the less big name transfers, how much they cost in this current transfer market, and how much all of that costs. Everyone thinks, well, okay, Donovan Dent costs a certain amount. UCLA should be able to go out and get 3 more guys at $4 million. And we keep trying to explain it to them, and they just don't get how much it all costs.
It costs a lot. I mean, it's astronomical. It's ridiculous if you actually think about it. I mean, we have the industry. Let's just go the sport, right, or sports. So, let's go even higher level, right? At UCLA, champion of Westwood is the overarching umbrella for NIL. So under that, we control all of the sports at UCLA, right? So whether it's men's basketball, women's basketball, we have deals with baseball players, with softball players, water polo players, gymnastics, football, right? So we have staff members that are in charge of everything across the board, whether it's specific sport, marketing, legal. We couldn't do this without, I could start putting names out there. It's become a massive operation. So the amount of money is insane if you actually think about it, right? You have football players in college football, up until, let's say, 24 hours ago when Brock Purdy signed his new deal. You had quarterbacks making more money than Brock Purdy, who was starting for a Super Bowl contender, right? Let's just start with that. That's not amateur sports. This is professional sports. So at the end of the day, when you talk about everything at UCLA, yes, it would be great if you could get, an all-star team across the board. The fact is, we're operating from the standpoint of we have many sports that need many different kinds of help. And we are squeezing every juice out of, every squeeze of the lemon across the board, from donors to sponsors to advertisers to the administration on how to put it all together. And there's only so much money involved because, again, there's no direct correlation between what you spend and revenue, right? So that's the hard part here. So at the end of the day, everyone can sit back and be a fan, right? So people can go, oh, well, UCLA didn't get, didn't have the biggest transfer portal class out there. Okay. Well, the Dodgers didn't have the biggest free agent signing class out there, but they paid for all their players up front. And I know that's a bad example because the Dodgers are behemoth, but I think you understand my point. Like, just because new talent isn't being brought in, the talent that we're keeping isn't free, right? Tyler Bilodeau is not free. Lauren Betts is not free. Rock Chalowski on the baseball team is not free. So the question becomes, what those people are getting, is the value better to keep them or to roll the dice and go out there and get somebody else? And at the end of the day, when you have an open spot and you have a weakness on a roster on any team, the advantage goes to the player and the agent, right? Because they're sitting there going, no, look, let's talk basketball. Let's talk men's basketball as we're doing. Donovan Dent's people knew we needed a point guard. They're not coming at a discount. Why? Because they're also talking to Kentucky, right? And Duke and Kansas and every place else that needs a point guard. It's a lot different then versus other players who are like, you know what, my home is here. I don't want to go to a second or a third school in 2 or 3 or 4 years. And if I'm taken care of, then why should I go someplace else, right? I'm living in Southern California. I'm going to UCLA. All those competitive advantages that we've talked about UCLA has over the years, that's when it comes into play, into retention, right? Or even getting people in the door. Then you talk about a kid like Anthony Peoples, another amazing person, wants to come home to get his graduate degree and is willing to sacrifice his basketball playing time. I mean, he knows he's not coming in to get starters minutes. He's coming in to fill a role that has been well established up front. And that role might be just that of a practice player or a low minutes player, right? Someone who can step in and play, someone who can practice, someone who can really help the infrastructure of the team, or someone who ends up, surprising everyone and playing 40 minutes. I don't know, right? I'm not the coach, but you have those kinds of things that you have to be looking at, and you have to deal with the agents, and you have to make sure that their egos are placated, and you have to make sure that people are being taken care of, not only financially but physically and mentally, emotionally, that their end goals are in place. Some guys' end goal is professional in the NBA. Some guys' goals are being able to just play someplace on the planet. Some guy's goal might just be, I want to become, I want to go in the music business. How can UCLA help me do that? So there's all of these things that go into place with all of these different personalities. So it is paramount that we have those, touched upon immediately as it goes, and at all times. And so I really think that we've done a great job. And hi and bye, Lori. So that's where it comes in. Would we like to have the best player at every position? I'm sure Mick Cronin would love that. But at the end of the day, there's only so many bites of the apple you can have. And the other thing is, even if you have all the money in the world, and look, we have a lot of money and we have a lot of great supporters, and I thank every one of them, from our biggest one, and they know who they are. And I hope you're feeling better. Down to the lowest bro who gives $1 a month or whatever. Like, thank you, because you've made a difference. But just because we have it, one, we're not going to spend it stupidly. But the other thing too is, even if we wanted to spend it stupidly, some of these players, I mean, the amount of players that Mick and Corey had to deal with, talking to, and it was great. I want $X. I want a guaranteed to start. I want guaranteed minutes, and I want this to be the way that I play. Well, that doesn't work when you have 5 people that are rowing the boat in 5 different directions. So it's really finding the guy that will, the player that will take the financial package we have, take the ancillary package, and fit into the team and culture that our coaches want to achieve.
There's so many. That was a great expansive answer. There's so many different directions to take that, but a lot of what you said there was what I was trying to get at with the retaining versus acquiring through free agency, like acquiring on the open market in the transfer portal, because there is no pre-existing relationship in a lot of cases, except in like an Anthony Peoples Jr. situation where he local and the whole thing. But that does come with more than likely a higher dollar figure and higher demands and all of that. So I guess, and this is kind of a broad, just kind of discussion question, but like, it does seem like that makes roster construction and finding proper fits and making sure that you're getting guys who want to be here, whether starting at the high school level or, after a year or 2 of college, becomes extremely important. And you want guys who are eligible to be retained, I guess is my point. How the chemistry of building a roster, and I know this is probably a conversation you have with Mick all the time, but how is that evolving? The discussion about how to, like, do you build more through high school? Do you build more through not, and we'll get into maybe 5-star recruitments versus transfer recruitments, but do you build maybe through mid-level high school, mid-level 4-star guys who can be retained at a higher level than, trying to roll the dice on the open market and the transfer market every cycle?
Yeah, look, I don't know the answer, and I don't know if our coaches know the answer yet,
Yeah.
right? Because it changes every year. So I can say it in two different ways here. If you look at our women's basketball team, right? Great season. Came up a little bit short, but we're returning everybody. And at the end of the day, we really needed, I think if you ask Corey, right, there was a missing ingredient, which we were very fortunate, through our champion of Westwood team to go out and get Gianna Neepkins. I think she'll make a huge difference, and it really could be the difference maker to cutting down the nets next year on that team. Well, first we had to retain everybody that we wanted to retain off that squad, right? And every one of those players would be in high demand if they went elsewhere. Let's just be honest. Or if they were men, they'd all be in the NBA, right? Like, thank God that the WNBA doesn't pay as much as college athletics. Like, that's just a fact.
Right.
So you start there, but on the flip side, we also lost one of the most highly, ranked freshman classes. The entire freshman class is gone off that roster.
Right.
Why? Because we had to double down on building around the upperclassmen who have one more go at this. So the roster construction this year for women's basketball could look totally different than what it's going to look like a year from now. Right. Just because of the way that the puzzle pieces shape up. The fact is that we were able to retain all the players on the men's side that we wanted to retain. Then you could supplement it with, a big ticket item or big ticket items. And, when you talk about 5-star, there was a discussion that we would have internally, without naming names, but I think everybody knows who I'm talking about without me saying it. Do you go for the transfer? And, we're thrilled that we got Donovan Dent. Or do you go for the 5-star freshman? And at the end of the day, where is the money being better spent? Where is the culture being better, the fit for the culture? Where's the upside? If I was building an NBA franchise, I would tell you we'd probably go in a different direction than the transfer, right? Because we know we would have this talent for 4 or 5 years, because that's how the NBA is locked into contracts. And you can get that guy to develop. If you're going on a 1-year basis, don't you want to bet on the guy who's done it for 3 years and you've seen it and he's an All-American versus the person who could be an NBA All-Star in 5 years? Yeah, we can all look back and go, Kevin Love was a different NBA player than he was at UCLA. That doesn't change the fact that he was a great UCLA Bruin. But when it's your professional job to go and train, his body completely changes. So at that point, if we're going to win a title, and look, and I can tell you unequivocally, it is Mick's goal to win a title at UCLA. And that being said, that is his focus. So is that goal going to be achieved this year? Let's just talk this year, because we don't know what's going to happen next year or the year after, in terms of what the rules are going to be, or how it's going to change, or what, if it's going to get worse, going to get better. Nobody knows. So this year, what our missing piece, what our assets were better put with the higher floor. The guarantee, right? The guy that game in and game out what he's going to get you, how he's going to work, how he's going to treat, his job, right? Coming in and doing it versus the, inarguable talent that a 5-star might have, but you don't know how it's going to translate. We've seen it. We've seen 5-stars come in and do wonders, and you've seen 5-stars that just can't get on the floor because they're just not ready for the rigors of college athletics and all of the needs and demands of being a UCLA Bruin. So I know that's a very generic, long-winded answer, but I think we made the right choice. Look, we could be proven wrong, but that doesn't mean that we made the wrong decision.
So I have two follow-ups on that. I'm glad you really touched on the concept of recruiting a 5-star and the distinction that if you were a pro team, you'd sign the rookie because he's locked in for his contract and he's got to be with you and he's going to develop. And this is a year-by-year process in college. You are paying for literally 1 year. And it's hard to impress upon a lot of the pros what that means in terms of a 5-star high school prospect and what a roll of the dice that is. And just not his productivity on the court, but everything that comes with, I'm not going to generalize it every single 5-star, but you can pretty much generalize that there are entourages and there's just a lot going on with 5-star high schoolers. The expectation from each of them is that they are in college for 7 months and they're done. And it's a 1 year process in doing this. So you have to judge, like you said, who provides you the highest floor year in and year out. And we just have not seen enough production from 5-star freshmen as 5-star recruits as college freshmen to push teams to win at a really high level, to Carmelo-ize the situation, to use that old great term. So I'm glad you really touched on that. I'd like you to. We've talked a little bit about it too, about how refreshing it was in this scope of dealing with transfers, high schoolers, and returning players, guys like Eric Daly or Sky Clark, who were more committed to the program necessarily than even their NIL numbers. I mean, Ken, you've told me that those guys verbally committed to you that I'm coming back without ever kind of even hearing their NIL number. I mean, how refreshing is that comparatively to everything else that you've dealt with in doing this job for the basketball program?
It's the best. I mean, our guys are the best, and I wish that everyone would know them. I can tell you that Sky, using Sky as the example, Sky, I think, told Ben Bolch of the LA Times that he was coming back when we were in Indianapolis for the Big Ten tournament. And at breakfast, the next morning, I went up to him at breakfast and I pulled the Trading Places. I pulled a $1 bill out and I said, I guess this is your NIL number because you just came back. And
did he take the dollar bill, Ken?
He did not. I don't even know if he knew the movie.
Yeah, I'm sure he did.
But it was amazing to hear, him turning and saying, I know that you're going to take care of me, but why am I being ungrateful? You guys have given me my life back, right? I'm going to get a UCLA degree. I was able to come home. He just got engaged. So he's had a lot of family issues and family troubles and tragedies. And he wants nothing more than to finish his college career and winning at UCLA. But that is secondary to the great human being that he is. And, I think as fans, because look, at the end of the day, I'm a fan. I want us to win. And it's, you can sit there and go, this guy didn't do this or that guy didn't do that. And, God, why did he play? And those are all fair things for us to do as fans. And you get to know the people, and it's really a push-pull because these guys are leaving their hearts and souls out there. And they really are appreciative of the life-changing things that UCLA have done from them, right? Whether it's Mick Cronin, whether it's any member of the staff, Darren, Nate, Yogi, Rod, Tyler Lesher, these guys, Dave Andrews, these guys are giving their heart and souls to these young men. The administration, Aaron Atkins, Martin, they are really helping foster these relationships, and it's really impressive that when you have someone who is literally saying, I want to stay, I want to be here, this is my dream. You gave me this opportunity, and I don't want to waste it. And they go to work right away. I'll tell you, Mick, as I said, Mick conducted exit interviews, for lack of a better way of putting it, right, on that Monday after the loss, and guys were in the gym right after their meetings. Like that's how much these guys are driven to win. And now the roster begins to fit a little better. And I know our fans are a little disappointed with something that didn't happen. And I will tell you that, the best laid plans of mice and men, right? But we're going to go, these guys are going to go to battle with who they have. And I think it's very important that in this day and age, you get guys that want to be on a team, that want to work as a unit rather than just your hired mercenaries. And, going back to the 5 stars, look, we were deep involved with a couple of 5 stars, and it's not the same conversation. The conversation starts with, he'll only be here for X amount of months. Like he's gone in March or April. Like
and guaranteed playing time and guaranteed starting
guaranteed everything, right?
Yeah.
We want to make sure that, the agent, the family, the cousin, the dog walker, everyone, like these people are at games. We want to make sure, we want to make sure that there's hotel rooms on the road. We want to make sure that there's, that there's flights, like they can't miss games. They can't do this, so the diva aspect comes into play. But look, no one, whether it's, I don't want to speak for coach, but no one's under the illusion that these kids wouldn't be here longer, right? Like you're not rooting for a 5-star to fail and to come back for a second year. So we all know that when you're getting a guy who's on an NBA draft board in a year as a top 10, 15 pick, we know what the end goal is. And we know what the end result's going to be. They're not going to be here for a second year. But when the conversations start that, he's not going to be here a second year. Okay, yeah, thanks, Captain Obvious. We're well aware of that. But how about let's talk about what you're going to do for the year to maximize your potential down the road. And I think a lot of these guys would just go pro if they could. They don't want to put in the work. So then you run that risk. Is this someone who will put in the work when they get to campus, or is this just, the bus stop on the way to, that they're making the transfer? They're coming in and they just want to be here for the shortest amount of time, and they'll be out the door. Versus a guy like Donovan who, within a week of signing was already asking us what he could do to help promote the program. I mean, that's a different mindset. So, and I'm not saying that's with all the 5 stars. I'm just saying that's with a few of them that we've conversed with over the past little bit here.
One other guy I wanted you to talk about a bit was Jamar Brown and your interaction with him and getting him signed, because that's kind of a great story.
Yeah, that's a kid who's from Arizona who bounced around, really didn't have much of an opportunity. I will tell you that the staff did a great job looking and trying to find untapped talent. And once we got involved and word got out, I will tell you that the inflation aspect took hold. Originally our competition wasn't that great, and then the next moment we're competing and recruiting against Oregon and Arizona and other big names. And again, a kid who's coming in with a specific role that has been outlined for him, and he's willing to accept that role, which again, I think is very refreshing in this day and age where you have a person who wants to come and win and be a cog in the wheel rather than the wheel.
With you mentioned obviously Sky's relationship with Men of Westwood and yourself, and you also mentioned like agents starting to become familiar with Men of Westwood and all of that. Like when you're on the transfer market, Xavier Booker's recruitment with kind of the Wild West nature initially of NIL, where guys were getting contracts canceled at other institutions, not obviously from Men of Westwood. Has there been a positive effect of Men of Westwood being kind of a stable force in this environment? And have you noticed a positive aspect of that when you are getting involved in these recruitments that, UCLA is going to actually do what it says it's going to do and so on and so forth?
I mean, I would believe so. I would hope so. I will tell you that I didn't. You asked me 2 or 3 years ago if I would be talking to agents basically almost every day, over the course of a year. I would tell you you're absolutely out of your freaking mind. But that being said, we are here, right? So we have relationships now that have come about from players, come about from negotiations that maybe didn't come to fruition for us, right? That a player went elsewhere, um, or from relationships that Mick and all of his years in the business have been able to help foster. So when players come, we're getting calls. We're getting calls all year. What can be done? If this comes to be, would you be interested? That's never our answer. We never answered, will we be interested? Our job is to facilitate the deal, make sure we have the ability financially to do it. And we're expanding and really trying to help market and use our advertising, marketing, promotion aspects to really build up the fan base and try to engage them, because that's what we need, right? We need more butts in the seats for all of our sports, whether that's men's basketball, women's basketball, baseball, football. So what can we do with our expertise there to help UCLA, to help, we have UCLA hired a great new person in Dan Cruz. So we've been working closely with him to kind of say, like, what can we do? And I'm very hopeful that over the next little bit here, we're going to see all these great changes. And at the end of the day, it's our job to make sure we have the best talent, or the talent, the best talent that our coaches want, and it's the job of the coaches to maximize that talent. So I think we've given our coaches that we deal with the best board to put their pieces on. Now let's see how they play the game.
So Ken, with the House settlement looming, the judgment could come down any day now. There are a lot of people out there that's saying, this is going to limit NIL, because you're going to have that committee from Deloitte, which will have to determine whether any deal is worth over $600. What do you see the future of NIL? Where do you think it's going? What do you think realistically happens?
Where do I see it going? It's going to get worse. Like this
Worse as in more inflation.
Yeah, I believe so. I believe. Look, I don't believe this court case is going to do a damn thing. I think
when is the first lawsuit going to be filed against Deloitte?
5 seconds after the first deal is mixed, and we're prepared for that. Right. And look, I'll say it like this: the way that Deloitte is talking, or some of the paperwork has come out, the issue is that certain deals will be rubber stamped. So it came out like a company like Nike, because they're a Fortune 500, or they're publicly traded, will be a real business model. So they'll basically say that's approved, versus somebody else, and so at the end of the day, like, why do I need to justify what my business spend is versus Nike that's not going to have to necessarily do it? Like, it's the system. There's no rules in place in this new system, right? You don't have a leader yet. I know they're talking about it. They'll bring in a CEO or something like that from an outside college agency. But then you also already have states that are putting out rules and that's saying, like, that will circumvent this court case. And again, when you use the term rev share, that should be a pot that is okay. right? It's like professional, again, it's professional sports, but professional sports, when it's rev share, the Players Association gets X% of the dollars. Well, at UCLA, I can tell you, because again, this is not just UCLA, this is everywhere, but because I'm involved with UCLA, right? The teams that get a piece of the quote unquote rev share, it's a large dollar number, and we have the ability to whack it up and cut up that pie how we see fit, right? So if basketball was given $10, that could go to one player, or that could go, $1 to 10 players. The same across football, the same across, women's basketball. There are certain sports that aren't getting rev share or getting very little, like that can barely afford a player. So that's not rev share, that's NIL. You're paying for NIL. You're right. Not everyone gets, right. The basketball team is not all getting the same number. Football team is not all getting the same number. Baseball team, et cetera, et cetera. That's NIL. So it's very hard to use the terminologies, right? Deloitte's saying fair market value. What's fair market value? What each of us pay to go get our car washed is what we choose to pay to get our car washed. Like, why is someone telling me what I can do, or that Tracy's number is too low, or Dave, your number's too high?
True.
It goes back to even like, I come from the world of advertising, right? So you have, if you think about like the Super Bowl, right? Your largest watched TV program of the year, which charges the most for a commercial ad space. And why does Budweiser need to spend, to buy 5 commercials per broadcast at a few $1 million? And then you have, back in the .com era, you'd have .coms buying it, or, a few years ago, we had one company that spent their entire year's budget on a Super Bowl ad. Do they need to justify why they're doing it, or that's their choice to do it? And the other issue why I believe this is fraught with peril is when you go to arbitration, right? When Major League Baseball goes to arbitration, the arbiter is paid by both the players' union and the owners. Right now, the arbiter, Deloitte, is only paid by the Big Four. What does the Big Four want? They want the money to come down that are going to the players so they could make more. That's what this comes down to, right? We've gone from the NCAA being the greedy ones to the conferences. And unless there's collective bargaining, we're going to be, I believe we're going to be in lawsuit hell for a while. And again, you have to figure out, why do we need collective bargaining? Well, it's blatantly obvious why we need it. We have to have it. If not, the industry is screwed. But you also then have to think about, why would the players give if right now they're given free agency, unfettered, they're given unfettered access to money, they can do what they want, how they want, right? It's not good for the industry. There's no question about that. But the other side, the quote unquote owner side of the table, has to give up a little bit more of their dollars to make it advantageous for the players, for that side to come and go, okay, we'll give up this because we know we're guaranteed that.
True. So Ken, I mean, we're coming close to the end here, but the most important question, seriously, I'm going to really hold your feet to the fire. How bad has your golf game suffered from the fact that for the last 3 years you've been doing a lot of things that you didn't do previously, like fundraising, dealing with players and agents and families, coaches, contracts, sponsors, events? Like, I mean, you barely put any time into this, right? I mean, your golf game's still fine, right?
I wish it was, but yeah, I mean, it's better because I'm able to take mixed money.
Okay, just between us, no one will say anything. Who consistently wins between you and Mick?
I'm happy to say it. He's a liar if he tells you he ever beats me. Now watch him go.
Has he ever beaten you?
Yes, he's beaten me, but not very rare. I mean, that's very rare if it happens.
Okay.
But he could also be throwing it to make me feel good. Yeah. I don't know. Has it suffered? Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, look, my life suffered.
How's Allie doing? Does she recognize you, or
does she recognize me? Yes, I mean, she does in passing. Yeah. No, it's look, I have a lot to complain about in life just because I'm me. But at the end of the day, it's been a blessing. It's been a curse. Like, it's honestly, it's been great. Like, I love UCLA, right? I love the athletics. I've grown up on it. My kids have grown up doing it with me. I have a group of friends from college that we still go to every game together, and it's been a joy to deal with. Mick Cronin, Corey Close, John Savage, Adam Wright, Kelly Perez. They're amazing people who are very gracious and very grateful on what we've done. And those people that have come to help me, and when we started, it was basically just me, right? And we now have a massive staff. As I said, I mentioned Michael Price. I have a general counsel. Like that's how ridiculous this is. We couldn't do it. I couldn't do half the stuff I do without Jeff approving stuff or not approving stuff for me. But Tyler, my buddy Tyler helps do all the marketing and promotions and sponsors. And I could go on, the list can go on and on. I can tell you some of my friends have become my therapists, which are not good because they're crazy. But at the end of the day, the goal here is to win, right? And if we're all paying good dollars to go watch these games, we want to have the best chance out there. And we'll put in our trust in the coaches to do their job. They were hired for a reason. But at the end of the day, they have to have the best ability to win, and the best ability to win is having the best players. So we're going to fight to do this. We're too deep in to stop. Hopefully we'll have some big new announcements coming that will help everything. We've been prepared for the court settlement to come in, so we're going to be nimble in terms of how we're moving and how we do things moving forward. And if we need to do legal aspects, we will do legal aspects. And if we need to just do financial aspects, we'll do that. And if we need to do marketing, we'll do that. So, I think the number one thing to our fans and our supporters and everyone who has done anything with us, from our biggest donor to our sponsors all the way down, is thank you. And know that, every time you entrusted us to do something, we're doing exactly what you ask. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. We might not get the player you want, but again, that's really not our call. That's, those are the coaches' calls. But we're doing the best we can to maximize everything we can do. And anyone who tells you otherwise is a patent liar. So, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for, to use an old Yiddish phrase, I don't have time for the mishigas on it. We're out here busting our asses off to bring UCLA titles, and that's what we're going to do. And if people are saying otherwise, they don't know me. They don't know the people that I've aligned myself with. They don't know my friends. They don't know all the people who are working tirelessly. And they don't know our coaches that have entrusted us and deal with us on a daily basis, because ultimately at the end of the day, that's a fact. So, and to Bro and to you guys, really, thank you. You guys have been awesome.
Well, Ken, I think I'll speak for the Bros and the UCLA community. Thank you for everything you've done, because, I talk to you often, and I have a real sense of your job and what you're tasked with, and the hours and the anguish. I mean, I'd say I've become one of those therapists. So,
with not enough alcohol, which is funny.
Yeah, we're going to try to make up for that next week.
Yeah.
But yeah, just a big thank you from the UCLA community for everything you're doing for just your desire to see UCLA win at a high level. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And look, and I would tell you that if anyone out there has any questions, or, contact us. We are very transparent when we can be. Obviously, I know that's a big thing. I know we haven't talked numbers, and I appreciate you guys not asking about numbers, and understand that what you see out there isn't necessarily true, and in either direction, high or low. And yeah, it's a fun game to figure out, where does UCLA NIL sit, or what did this guy get, or what did that guy get? And look, it kind of is what it is, right? We can cry that we don't have more, And I can tell you we have a lot more than a lot of other people, and then we don't have as much as some other people. And those are facts, right? But at the end of the day, we are doing our best. And if there's, questions about that, feel free. I'm happy to always take questions from the bros, whether it's through you guys, whether it's on the forum, whether it's, contacting us through our websites, however you want. If you see me, come up and talk. We're happy to, and and all people that represent Men of Westwood and Champion of Westwood are willing to talk about what we do and how we do it.
Great stuff, Ken. Really appreciate you. Appreciate your time. He's doing yeoman's work. He's doing yeoman doesn't really cover.
Yeoman is not it. No.
The
whole fleet of yeomans.
He's doing Sisyphean labor. He is pushing that rock up the hill. And you should appreciate that. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate your time. And everyone out there.
Water your bamboo. It looks like it's hurting.
Yeah, it needs to be watered.
Yeah, I'll trim it too. Cut it down for you. Yeah.
Well, because we want to see, next time we talk, we want to see how much it's grown from then.
Oh yeah. Well, you got to cut it down so it grows even more. You got to cut the lower branches so the water goes up higher.
Correct.
There we go.
All right. Ken Graiwer, Trace Pearson. I'm David Woods. We'll talk to you again next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.